Welcome to the Hair Loss Show. Dr. Russell Knudsen and Dr. Vikram Jayaprakash discuss issues relating to hair loss and the medical and surgical treatment of hair loss in both men and women.
Hi everybody, welcome to this episode of the Hair Loss Show. I'm Dr. Russell Knudsen.
And I'm Dr. Vikram Jayaprakash.
Thank you very much for tuning in and watching, and please remember to subscribe and ask any questions that you want of us. We're very, very grateful for the support we get from our viewing audience and very happy to answer any questions. All right, so today is going to be part two of our discussion of new trends in therapy for androgenic alopecia, and today we're going to specifically talk about emerging therapies that are currently being researched. Now, we normally don't spend a lot of time on topics that are only in research because we like to talk about proven things, but the idea behind this is to explain where the philosophy of treatment is moving so that you can see, get a glimpse into what's coming down the pipeline pretty shortly.
So in the last episode, we talked about the different types of therapies that we commonly use in our practice. We talked about stimulation therapies and we talked about blocker therapies, and specifically the blockers relate to this equation there. We've gone through that multiple videos on the channel, which is basically testosterone getting converted into dihydrotestosterone, because we know that the DHT has the propensity to cause miniaturization of the hair follicle. But that's the general story.
That's the superficial part of the story, because the next part of the story is that once it's converted to DHT, it doesn't become active in the follicle till it binds to the specific male hormone or androgen receptor. So we have an androgen receptor that sits inside the follicle, and neither T nor DHT is active in the follicle unless it binds to the receptor.
Yes.
Now, the problem with androgenic alopecia is that the androgen receptor, which, by the way, there's a higher population of androgen receptors in the frontal scalp than anywhere else in the scalp in balding people, which is part of the problem, prefers to bind DHT to the tune of 100 to 1 compared to testosterone. So the bad testosterone for hair, it prefers to bind 100 of those for every one of the not harmful testosterone. So in the past, we have not been able to treat the androgen receptor in men because it also binds testosterone as well as DHT. So the problem with that is that if we block the androgen receptor, we block the binding of the male hormones, and we have this potential feminization effect.
So we don't want that.
So in our transgender patients, for example,
yes,
we do block the receptor if they're losing hair because they are transgender and transforming.
Yes.
And so the feminization effect is beneficial rather than harmful. But in our men who are cisgender, this has really not been a therapy we can talk about.
And so again, if you want to dig deeper, that is the generalized form of the androgen receptor, but then there are more specific androgen receptors that was more specific for hair. So the theory being, well, if you can just block those specific receptors, then do you then stop the progression of the hair loss? That's right. And that would be the ideal, because then you're specifically targeting what the underlying issue is without having to change or vary the hormonal side of things.
The genetics isn't entirely clear yet, but we do understand that in androgenic alopecia there's difference in gene expression, there's difference in how many receptors there are, there's differences in how the androgen receptor performs in balding people versus non-balding people. So there are a variety of things going on within that genetic concept. But interesting new research that is being done at the moment on using very, very specific anti-androgen blockers that don't block the whole of the receptor, don't block the whole of the androgen cascade. This is where the research is going at the moment, to find something that is a selective androgen receptor that'll work on the blocking in the receptor here, so that we are really just targeting the DHT blocking to the receptor and nothing else blocking to the receptor. Now, these research projects are at various stages around the world, but there are some interesting things. So, for example, 3 years ago in the US, the FDA, which is the Food and Drug Administration, passed a specific medicine called clascoterone, brand name Breezula, which is a topical anti-androgen that they use for acne. And now that ingredient is being actively researched to see if it is equally applicable to androgenic alopecia.
So to be clear, I mean, this is not commercially available just yet for use for people who are suffering from androgenic alopecia. It's still going through its trials right now, but the data is promising that it may be using that could potentially target the specific receptor and be able to help and stunt the degree of hair loss. And so, again, coming back to the modality of administration, it could be a topical, which the Breezula is, or we could be using that as a form of mesotherapy as well. Again, getting it below that, into that dermal layer, targeting it at that level, so it's more localized in its effect.
And so there are two other points I want to make about this. Firstly, at the moment, we've only been blocking at this level, right? If we blocked at this level and at this level, we would be hoping in our more aggressive versions of balding that we would get better response. So, for example, remember that the slightly fading effect of finasteride is that at the 5-year mark, 2/3 of the patients in the trial were still stable, but 1/3 weren't. So this is targeting more or less the 1/3 that's progressing despite using things like finasteride. If you can block 2 levels, that might be a big improvement on what we can achieve at the moment. So that's an important concept, that if we can block the receptor as well as that, then this could give the more aggressive version of the balding a better response. The second idea behind all of this is that if we can basically target using specific, this is only the blocking side of it, okay? But the blocking side of it's critically important because it works better in the long term than the stimulating side does. So the stimulating side, minoxidil, any of the prostaglandins, for example, or any of the other things that claim to be stimulants, they have a declining effect because they have no effect upon what's going on here. It's not target specific. Whereas using finasteride and dutasteride is target specific, and if we can add in an effective androgen receptor blocker that doesn't cause unwanted side effects, then we've got now the more powerful targeted therapy here that still can use stimulation as a supportive therapy.
So the thing probably for me that is one of the take-home factors here, yes, this is not fully available just yet, but I kind of like to think of it as another tool in the toolbox, or another brush in the paint box, because when you're painting, you don't just use one brush. There's multiple things that you're using. So you may use a little bit of stimulation therapy. You may use a little bit of blocker therapy, and then in the future we may be using regular, androgen receptor blocker therapy via topical or mesotherapy on all of the things that I've talked about before. And it's about being able to really, I mean, that's the artistry with the medical therapy side of things, creating a plan that's specific for that individual, that meets their needs, that they can also be compliant with as well.
And that's the critical thing, because when patients say to us, what should I do?
Yes.
I'm going, well, my job is to give you the options here, and you've got to decide what you're prepared to do. Because we're not asking you to do this for 3 weeks. Yes. We're not asking you to do this for 3 months. We're not even asking you to do this for 3 years.
Yeah.
We're asking you to do this until you don't care,
yeah.
if ever. So basically, it's critically important that we enlist our patients' support in the idea of the treatment program. And that's why we give them input. Yeah. We don't dictate, we give them input, we give them options. And if they can come to a decision about taking something that they're prepared to do and are comfortable to do, then they're more likely to be compliant, and therefore they're more likely to be successful.
Yeah. Good. Well, I think that's a really good discussion. We will, hopefully that will, over the next months and years.
I expect we'll hear a lot more in about the next 18 months to 2 years.
Yeah. And we'll obviously update you when more information comes forth. But thank you again for watching. Hope you enjoyed that. Please keep the questions coming, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Bye for now.